Today we have F1 content creator Sarah on the grid.
So pretend
Okay,
this.
let's learn.
Why do
So
cars
this
have
week
F1?
is the
It's
Spanish
Belgium
Grand
free
Prix qualifying.
Like to adhere to.
Welcome back to the Sweet Take, and I can't think of a better person to help us break down what these 2026 new regulations actually mean. She made toilet paper, bananas, and Lewis Hamilton's dog go viral with her breakdowns of what these tech specs are. Sarah, so happy to have you on with us today, and I'm so excited to chat with you because there's so much stuff that we need to demystify. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, there is a lot of change coming. I am so excited about the new regulations to see how they'll come out and how they're going to really affect racing.
For sure. So maybe before we get started, do you want to quickly introduce yourself and let our audience know a bit about you? And then I'd love to know why you decided to do a breakdown of the of regulations specifically in such a detailed way. It was fantastic.
Oh, well, thank you. And yes, that's sort of what my whole channel is about. I started my account, Sarah on the Grid, to make F1 more accessible for fans who were both new to the sport and who maybe have been older but haven't been paying as close of attention to the technical side of the sport. I really wanted to answer people's questions that I was seeing in the comments and online. There were a lot of people who don't have an engineering background or don't have a family member who taught them F1 growing up. And I just feel like everybody deserves the opportunity to learn about this sport so that they can get more invested and, have more reasons to scream at the TV. And I created the 2026 regulation guide because as soon as I started posting reels talking about the technical side of F1, that was one of the number one questions that I started getting on almost every video and guide. So I think there was a real thirst for knowledge there, that people were knowing that the 2026 regulations were coming down the line, but they didn't have any idea what they were or what they meant. And a lot of the videos and guides out there were extremely technical. They were not accessible by people who don't have that historic F1 knowledge or who don't have an engineering background. So that was the goal of my guide, was to make it simple and make it accessible while also being very thorough so you don't get confused when the new cars start coming out next year.
Well, I'm sure I can speak for many people that have bookmarked that post, how grateful we are for you to breaking that down. We're going to jump into some of the, I guess, more broader changes in a moment here, but what is one change that you specifically are the most excited about?
I think the one that'll be the most interesting for me is the change to the floor. So instead of having all of these Venturi tunnels under the floor that are really helping the cars right now increase their downforce, that's going away. So we're going to have a much smoother floor to the car on the underside. But this is sort of going back to cars like pre 2022. So drivers like Lewis Hamilton and Alonso, for them, it might be a return to an old school style of racing where it's based more on power and less on downforce. So I'm really excited to see how that change to the cars is going to affect drivers and driving styles.
Oh my gosh, that didn't even cross my mind. And Lewis Hamilton needs a pick me up. I've been talking a lot about how, I feel so sad whenever I watch his
I
press
know.
conferences. And it's always so crazy to me that a seven-time world champion has that much doubt about himself. And it does make him so human. And so if there's a leg up for Lewis, I am all here for it. And I didn't even think about that. So that's amazing.
I know. I am really excited for him. I mean, it would just be really great to have him and Charles, who's also been struggling with a Ferrari car, have them in something that they feel more comfortable in. And so I think while we are moving forward into 2026, in a way, we're also moving backwards in terms of design. So it's going to help those drivers that really prefer that style of driving or who grew up with that. So we might even see Alonso on the podium again because he's also got Adrian Newey developing the car at Aston Martin. So it might be a really year.
A lot to look forward to.
Yeah.
Last question before we jump into it. So I found your analogies super fun. I personally love analogies. We do a lot of analogies on Milkshake. How do you think about analogies and which one was your favorite?
In the guide, probably Leo and Roscoe, just because they're adorable little dogs.
Yeah.
So, for anybody who missed it, the 2026 cars will be lighter by about an English bulldog and a yellow dachshund dog. Just that little bit of extra weight removal. The cars had just been continuing to get heavier and heavier and heavier and wider and wider. And a lot of that had to do with safety. So I think we have more innovations now that are letting them slim them down. It's the first time F1 cars have ever gotten lighter in the history. So I think that's really going to help the overall performance of the cars.
That's a great segue. So I noticed in your guide, you obviously spent some time talking about the like physical changes to the car in the sense they're getting smaller, they're getting lighter, they're getting shorter. In your opinion, where do you think the biggest performance implications are from those aspects specifically?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we're going to have in change is driver style. And I think we really need to see what kind of aerodynamics on top of the car instead of the underside of the car will affect the speed. So as of right now, we don't have the cars, so we're not sure how they're all going to turn out. But there have been a lot of different simulation testing that have happened. And I think a lot of the teams and drivers are worried about speed and figuring out how to work with these new types of engines and then how to adjust the aerodynamics on the sides and the front of the car to give them those little bit of increases of speed. So right now, I feel like there's still a lot of mystery in terms of where we're going to get increased performance, but we should get closer racing. What's going to change are the aerodynamics around the wheelbases, and the wheels themselves are getting slimmer. So we're hoping for less dirty air and we're getting slimmer cars. So I think that it's going to allow at least a little bit of closer racing, but I don't think Monaco is going to be that much more exciting yet.
That's really cool because, right now a lot of the aerodynamics is on the bottom of the car, which no one sees unless
Right.
there's an accident and the car gets lifted with the crane. And I know a lot of these teams hate it when photographers are taking photos of the underside because that is where a lot of their IP is. But now that you're saying that more of the aerodynamics will be on the outside of the car, it will give us an opportunity to analyze it even further because there will be so much more visible that we'll be able to see going into next year.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It'll all be on the wings and, the side mirrors and how they're affected, how the barge boards on the sides are shaped. And those are the ones that are going to send the air off from behind the tires. I think there's a lot of room for innovation. And right now, I'm just extremely curious to see how those little tiny bits, the little air funnels, are going to affect the overall performance. Some teams are really optimistic, others are not. So I think 2026, at least the testing period, is going to be really wildly different. And we're going to immediately see a lot of innovations at the beginning of the season of teams trying to catch up, trying to copy each other, looking at the photographs, looking at the cars, trying to match up where they find other teams getting superior performance.
Very cool. One of your posts kind of talked about wing size and this thing called XZ mode. What is that?
Okay, so X mode and Z mode are these aerodynamic changes with the wings. Right now we have DRS, and that's where the rear wing will fold back, reducing the amount of drag. It lets more air through that rear wing, which is great on the straights. Well, next year in 2026, not only will the rear wing move, but the front wing will also be dynamic and move. And so they will open up on the straight, which is X mode. But I've heard that the FIA might switch and just call it a straight mode anyway. So if you're confused, don't worry. And then Z mode with the turns, that'll be when the wings close up, which help increase downforce through the corners. So Z mode is for cornering, X mode is for straights. You don't have to be within a second of another car to activate these modes. That's going to be just part of the track. Anytime you're going around a corner, you're going to want the Z mode. Anytime you're going down the straight, you want that nice open wing. So I think it'll be really interesting to see more active aerodynamics happening throughout the track, but that'll be a struggle to see how they implement it, how drivers have to activate it. So there's going to be a lot of complications around that, I think.
Gotcha. And it's funny when you specifically say the 1 second rule doesn't apply. My brain immediately went to, oh, is this another element of DRS? But, another a piece of information that you shared with all of us is DRS is going away.
Yeah.
And something called mom is coming into play. So, how would you describe mom to someone who doesn't watch F1?
So mom is just a power boost. So think about your blender, and you might have like it'll have a dial, or it'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, but then there's like a super like ice crush mode, or like a super high mode. Or if you are into like music documentaries, it's turning it up all the way to 11. So what you're taking is this battery power that you've charged up by braking throughout the circuit, and then you can immediately deploy all of that power to your car. And the drivers get to decide when to use this. Now, they do have to be within 1 second of another car to use it, but it's no longer limited to certain zones the way that DRS is. And it's not an aerodynamic change the way that DRS is. It is a power change. So it's more power, more energy that they can have at the push of a button. But once it's drained, then they will need to charge that up again in other laps. So it'll be very strategic for when drivers use that, or when they see the best opportunity to use that manual override button.
That's very exciting. I didn't know that the DRS zones are going away. And so I can see how the introduction of mom might make racing a bit more unpredictable. And I'm sure everything in an F1 car is connected. So how mom affects each car might be different. So that also may determine the level of a boost that the car would have. Do you think that this is going to make racing more exciting, closer battles than DRS?
I do think so, because DRS, you're really limited with where you can use it. Whereas with the mom, you'll be able to use it anytime that you're charged up and close to a driver. So if you see an overtaking opportunity on a different spot in the track than maybe the DRS zone would have been, well, now you can take advantage of that opportunity. So it'll add a whole other level of strategy for drivers that are looking to do overtakes on tracks, which for me is really exciting. And then you add that plus the slightly slimmer car and less dirty air. And I think we're really opening up the overtake opportunities for next year.
Do you have any predictions for which drivers you feel would thrive with mom
Oh,
next year?
I mean, it's hard not to say, but I think, Alonso and Lewis Hamilton, as of right now, might really do well with this, because all of these innovations and things that are changing are, in a way, some of them are about going back to what we were doing before 2022. Older drivers who have been on the grid for longer will, I think, appreciate these changes. It might feel a little bit more familiar to them. I think we could see Nico Hulkenberg do well, but I also think, there's no way that Max doesn't do well with this change. He's such a great driver and very skilled. I'm sure he'll be getting a lot of sim time to develop and sort of test where to use this and see where those racing line opportunities are. So yeah, I think that's who will do the best with them.
Yeah, I can't wait to see. I think Max and Oscar of like the newer generation drivers, they're both so amazing at overtaking, even without mom right now. So it'll be really cool to see how they use it to their advantage next year.
Yeah, I think Oscar could be a standout as well. I mean, he seems like he's really dedicated and focused on, a technical side of driving. Not to say others aren't, but I've been so impressed with him. I would love to see how he does next year.
Definitely. So I'm sure you are as excited as I am about Cadillac joining the grid
Oh,
in 2026. And of course, with an 11th team means some changes to how, quali happens. And so you talked about that too. Can you tell us a little bit more about what those changes are with Cadillac joining the grid?
yeah, so we do have Cadillac joining the grid. And one question I get a lot is too, is it Audi joining? Audi is just taking over Sauber team, so they won't be adding new seats. The Cadillac is adding 2 new seats because they're a new team. So we have an 11th team, 2 more drivers, and that really affects qualifying, because now in Q1 and in Q2, they'll each knock out 6 drivers. And it means more traffic on the track during those qualifying sessions. So I always enjoy watching qualifying. It's incredibly intense, and I love the strategy behind it. But I think teams are going to to need more strategy for when they send their car out and really determining like what's the best way, like when are the right tires, because it's going to just get even more chaotic, which is going to be fun for us, but hard for the teams.
Do you think that it's going to affect more the midfield teams or the top teams by this new format of quali?
Well, I think 2026 is going to really level the playing field. I mean, right now we don't have much, time difference, or at least compared to previous years. There isn't a huge time spread across the grid already. And we've got teams like Sauber ending up on podium. So it's already a really tight field. And then in 2026, everybody will be new to these regulations. So I think initially we're going to have maybe one or two teams that are standouts in terms of design, but very quickly over the course of the first half of the season, I think that field will narrow back down as teams see what's working on other cars. So I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think Cadillac is going to come out into 2026 and start winning races right away. It's going to take time for everybody to gel. Even if they have amazing drivers, which I'm sure they'll get, I think they'll struggle with getting all their communications and processes in place. And it'll be 2027 when they work their way up from sort of the midfield to be more competitive, if they're lucky.
Yeah, I think I remember hearing Liam talk about how in 2025, quali is so incredibly important because, like you said, the field is separated by like a tenth. And
Right.
so, where you qualify in the race, it actually makes it very challenging to pass in the race because you're still only separated by a couple of tenths. So, with these new regulations going into next year, hopefully that also means a bigger spread in terms of time in qualifying, which means also more, I guess, unpredictability in the racing. And I'm sure at the end of however many years that these regulations will be in place, most teams will have mostly figured it out and will kind of be back into shorter time frames. But new regulations means more entertainment for the rest of us.
Yeah, definitely more entertainment and no more like DRS trains, which is something we've seen quite a bit of this year. I think there was one race we had recently, and I think 8 cars were all in a DRS train of each other. And so that really makes it a struggle to overpass because you can only do it in this one spot in this DRS zone, and everybody can use DRS in that DRS zone. So there is no, net benefit. But with the new manual override button, that's going to open up a lot more creative opportunities for overtaking. You don't all have to do it in the same spot. Maybe the one person in the train has deployed it, and so now they have to go a little bit slower, and that'll give the person behind them the opportunity to use their manual override on a different part of the track. I think it's going to get a lot more creative, even if the cars maybe are further apart in time. The driver's skill is going to be the new highlight of the 2026 season.
Amazing. So, last question for this section. What are your predictions, Sarah, for who the two Cadillac drivers might be next year?
I mean, who I would love personally to see Joe and Botas back together again. They were in, a not great car. I think we can all agree on that when they were on Romero together and then became Sauber. But I think if I was at Cadillac, I would purposely be hiring Botas and Perez because what Cadillac needs is institutional knowledge. They need drivers that have driven for amazing teams. And Perez has driven for Red Bull while they were winning world championships. Bottas has driven for Mercedes when they were winning world championships. Both of those drivers were second in the World Drivers' Championship. So the amount of knowledge that they can bring from their teams, from their experience, from doing all of these tracks to Cadillac, I think that's a more valuable asset for Cadillac as they start their F1 team than almost any other driver can bring. While I do love seeing rookies, I don't want to see a rookie on Cadillac in 2026 because if the Cadillac car isn't great, which again, it probably won't be a championship winning car their first year. That's not me being mean. That's just, it takes time to win. Then a rookie won't be able to show off their incredible performance. Whereas Bottas and Perez have already proven that they can become very high drivers in the driver standings, and they're not risking ruining a long career in F1. So that's my hope, is that it'll be Bottas and Perez at least for 1 year, and then maybe one of them will move to another team or something, and Cadillac can bring on either an American or a rookie in the 2027 season.
You have such a pragmatic approach to, how like building blocks that these teams have in terms of, extracting the most in their first year. I
Yeah,
totally agree with your logic. I think that there's also potentially maybe an element if they bring on a younger, very marketable driver that they can use that as an element to then, build the Cadillac brand. I know there's been a lot of discussion around Cadillac saying they would love to have an American driver, American team, but I hear your approach sounds like the logical path forward because we don't want to ruin people's careers. You're
right,
totally right.
right.
Cao, and especially Cao, I feel like his talents weren't shown in the way that they could have been. Valtteri has had a very long-standing career in Mercedes. He's won championships with them. And poor Zhao, I do feel for him because I feel like it just wasn't the best showing of his talents, even though in the back half of that year he did score points. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
I really liked him as a driver. And, he was very close to Bottas in their qualifications and in their race pace. So I don't want that sort of thing to happen to an American driver where they step into a team with a car that's not ready. And then everybody's like, oh, look, they can't perform. And it's like, well, it's not about the rookie. It's about the car and developing the team and even the radio engineers, as we know from Ferrari. There are a lot of moving parts, and I want, if we're going to have an American join the grid, I want them to have the best opportunity to succeed possible. So I think that's 2027. But I know that there are a lot of different moving factors, including like sponsorships, like who's going to be able to bring in the most money for Cadillac. And that might be an American driver instead of Bottas and Perez. I don't know yet. I'm excited to see what happens. I won't be crying any tears over somebody not getting a seat. But obviously I'm a little bit nerdy and who I think would be best for.
yeah. No, I'm sure both of us will be waiting with bated breath about with who they're actually going to announce.
Yeah.
So, with that, Sarah, why don't we close with a milkshake tradition, which is called Checkered Confessions? I'm going to ask you a handful of questions, and I just want your gut reaction, first thing that comes to your mind, and there are no wrong answers. Are you ready?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, first one, mom or DRS?
Mom, for sure.
Which team do you think will benefit the most from the 2026 regulations?
I think Mercedes, they're struggling and their power unit is something everybody's been talking about and how they feel like it'll be superior next year. So I think they're going to see the most improved.
Okay. Which driver do you think is going to most likely accidentally press mom at the wrong time?
So mean. I'm not sure. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Colapinto, just because he's had the least amount of time in the F1 car on the grid right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Probably a rookie because there's a lot to used to.
Yeah, yeah. And that team is going through so many changes right now. That's just all I can say on that. I mean, I think he's a great guy.
Yeah,
See the accident that happens, maybe.
for sure. Which 2026 regulation would you most likely forget if you were a race engineer?
Well, gosh, it's so hard because so much is changing right now. But I mean, I would put more stuff back on the bottom of the floor. But I'm excited to see what they're gonna do without that. But that's probably that's such a comfort in terms of like we know what's working here and it's been working, and so to continue with that would be what I would want to do. But yeah.
Okay. What are three words that you would use to describe the 2026 car?
I guess slimmer, lighter, and unpredictable. I don't think we have good data yet. While there has been some testing, I don't think we have good data yet on how these are going to handle cornering with a lot of different cars on track together. So I'm really looking forward to the testing period because right now we're not quite sure how they're going to perform there.
I like unpredictable. And yes, Bahrain is going to be, everyone's going to be glued to see, like, what's everyone else doing. And yeah,
Yeah,
it'll be
it's
exciting.
crazy. My goodness. Like, I know we're only halfway or a little over halfway through the 2025 season, but I've let everybody, I mean, I've had so many comments about 2026. I'm like all amped up and ready for it already. So, yeah.
Nice. What is the most niche F1 fact that you're obsessed with right now?
So I sort of did a little bit of a reel on this because I get so many questions, and it's the blue flag rule. So if you're not familiar with this rule, it's anytime that a driver has been lapped by a faster driver. So let's say Piastri's gone all the way around the track, but somebody like Behrman, who has unfortunately ended up near the back sometimes, he's getting lapped. So he'll be shown a blue flag that says, get out the way. Well, he actually has 3 blue flags to comply with it. So they don't have to do it immediately. They can choose when to move over to let another driver by. And it's funny, sometimes you'll hear the faster driver complain on the radio, like, why aren't they letting me by? Like, haven't they seen the blue flags? Because they want to get past them really quickly. So a lot of people don't know the reason behind all of those complaints on the grid. But yeah, they've got 3 blue flags, so they have a little bit of a distance to move over.
So at the Hungary race, I heard Lando tell his engineer to get on the radio to let other engineers know that he's coming through and to give them a heads up. But technically, they don't need to do anything, is what you're saying. They can ignore that plea.
Not until Lando is there, behind the car, is the blue flag going to be shown to the front driver. And that front driver can wait. They can say, no, I want to go around this turn on the specific racing line first. So unless Lando overtakes them on his own, they don't have to move out of the way immediately. They have a little bit of a time. So the blue flags are interesting. They're there to keep the race going so that the slower drivers can't hold everybody up, which is great. But at the same time, there's still a little bit of racecraft involved, which I appreciate.
Hmm. Okay, last question. What's your guilty pleasure F1 conspiracy theory?
Okay, so what I have been saying for a while, I don't know if it'll come true, is that ever since Adrian Newey, who we know is just a premier car designer, especially when it comes to aerodynamic developments, he went to Aston Martin. And it's my theory that Joss and Max will be interested in following him there. So I don't think that Max, I was never really sure, and of course we all heard the rumors. I never thought he was going to immediately go to Mercedes. I think what Max has been talking about is to different teams about 2027, because if I was a driver, I wouldn't want to switch teams right when all the new regs are coming out, because not only do I have to learn a brand new car with a brand new, sort of deployment system with different features, but then I have to get to know a whole new team as well. And maybe that team doesn't develop the car as well as another team. So if he's smart, he's going to see how all the cars stack up in 2026 and then make a move for 2027 possibly. So that's my conspiracy theory, is that those talks are happening with Max and Aston Martin, maybe 2028. I don't think it's really true, but that's my theory that could be true.
Yeah, again, so logical, Sarah, so good. Technically, Max's contract, I think, goes until the end of 2026, so it would be up for renewal anyways for
Yeah.
27. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, all very logical over here. I like to strategist.
Yes, for sure. That's it for this episode of The Sweet Take. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. That was so fun to hear your insights and break down what 2026 means. And I have never felt so excited and more excited for what's to come. And it's only August. We have many more months to go. So thank you again. If you're not following Sarah already, I've linked her socials below. So make sure to check her out. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.